Love was supposed to crown me. Instead, it sharpened my teeth. Red lips, cold champagne, and 4 tombstones behind me. Every promise they made, I turned into armor. I don't collect lovers anymore. I collect lessons. And tonight, the only vow I'll make is the one carved in fire. I leave untouched, unbroken, and unforgettable. What if I told you I killed them all? And I'd do it again with better lipstick this time? I'm Harley Van Devereaux. I'm 55, fabulously wealthy, and 4 husbands deep into a graveyard of heartbreak. I wasn't always this way. Once, I believed in love the way little girls believe in fairy tales. Only my castles were marble, my carriages were Bentleys, and every prince I kissed turned out to be a bastard in disguise. People look at me now and see diamonds, lawsuits, magazine covers, and think I must have had it all. They don't see the bruises under the foundation, the years I spent whispering, "Please don't leave me," into pillows that smelled like other women. You want to know when it started? Not the heartbreak, the hunger, the need. Picture this. A little girl hiding behind a velvet curtain in a cold Manhattan penthouse, watching her father slam the door, watching her mother pour another drink and whisper, "This is love, Harley. It's supposed to hurt." That was my bedtime story. That love is war, that silence means loyalty, that a woman stays even when she's bleeding. I swore I'd never live like them. I swore I'd find real love or burn the world down trying. I kept my word, mostly. At 31, I married Michael, husband number 1, a banking mogul with a jawline like ambition and hands that smelled like power. We were the perfect Wall Street couple, sharp, beautiful, photogenic. I believed I had him wrapped around my manicured finger until I walked into the boardroom and found his pants around his ankles and a blonde junior associate with his trust fund in her mouth. I didn't cry. I bought a new Chanel coat that afternoon and kissed him goodbye with red lips and no regret. Lesson 1. If a man's going to cheat, let him do it while you look expensive. Then came Blake, husband number 2. I was 35. He was 29 and gorgeous like sin on legs. We met at a Cannes after party, married in Vegas 6 weeks later. He called me his muse. I called him my addiction. Until I found pictures of him in our bed with someone else's lipstick on his thighs. Scarlet. I only wear plum. I left him a post-it on the mirror that said, "You'll miss the woman who taught you how to shine." He never called. I never checked. Jean-Luc was different. Husband number 3. An artist, a romantic, a storm in silk scarves and bad intentions. I was 39, lonely, and desperate to be worshipped. He painted me like a goddess. He treated me like a stranger. One night I found him with our gallery intern, barely 20, barely legal. I poured turpentine on every canvas he'd ever painted of me and walked out barefoot in the rain. That was the night I stopped believing in redemption. Then came Vincent, the charming, Harvard-educated, tailored devil of a man. I was 44. I let him in. Into my bank accounts, my business, my veins. He said he'd protect my legacy. What he meant was he'd steal it. Offshore accounts, forged signatures. When I confronted him, he smirked and said, "You made it too easy." I didn't scream. I poured myself a 30-year-old scotch and laughed. Because that was the moment I realized I wasn't the victim. I was the common denominator. Time passed. I built myself back from zero again. By 50, I stopped hoping for love and started investing in art and silence. Then, 5 years later, he walked in. The architect, the stranger with the ocean eyes, his name was Jason, and I didn't know it yet, but the man who smiled at me over blueprints would one day be the last person I ever trusted, or the last person I ever should have. This was the beginning. This is how you become the woman they whisper about in courtrooms and nightmares. This was the birth of Harley Van Devereaux, not the lover, not the wife, not the muse, but the architect of her own vengeance. And darling, that was only phase 1. Grief didn't hit me like a wave. It came like a match. One minute, I was sipping Earl Grey in silk pajamas, watching morning sunlight flirt through Italian blinds. The next, I was staring at a radiology report with the word malignant printed in bold Helvetica. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3, not a death sentence yet, but close enough to make me feel the breath in my lungs suddenly expensive. At first, I laughed. Quietly, the way rich women laugh at bad reviews or cheap champagne. I'd survived 4 divorces, 2 suicide attempts, 1 mine, 1 a husband's, and a tabloid scandal involving a yacht, a bisexual pop star, and a missing diamond necklace. Cancer? Please. But that night, lying alone in my king-size coffin of a bed, staring at the ceiling carved by some overpriced Florentine artisan, I realized something terrifying. I was going to die, and I hadn't even gotten even. 3 weeks after the diagnosis, I stopped taking calls. I lit a cigarette for the first time in 20 years and watched it burn without blinking. My reflection in the mirror didn't look scared. She looked awakened. So I made a list. Not a bucket list. A retribution roster. Michael, Blake, Jean-Luc, Vincent. 4 men. 4 living autopsies waiting to happen. I didn't want to scream or slap or even be seen. I wanted precision. I wanted erosion. Michael opened his laptop one morning and watched in real time as the SEC froze every one of his hedge fund accounts. Every asset tied up, every board seat revoked. He blamed a whistleblower. He never guessed she wore Chanel No. 5. Blake's voice leaked in a private podcast. Him, drunk, calling every woman he ever worked with a stepping stone in stilettos. Within 24 hours, every studio cut ties. He issued an apology that read like a tantrum. I framed it. Jean-Luc got his moment during Paris Art Week. He unveiled a massive canvas meant to be his magnum opus. The press called it a derivative mess. I'd hired a grad student to paint over the original a week before, then staged an anonymous tip to get him exposed as a plagiarist. He cried on French television. Vincent was last, my favorite. The IRS audited his firm, then the Bar Association, then a quiet little envelope showed up at his wife's office. Photos, bank transfers, names. She took the kids. He took pills, survived, but lost everything. I didn't smile, I exhaled. But it wasn't just about revenge. Underneath the ash and arsenic, there was something else. A whisper. A warmth. I hated it. I needed it. His name was still echoing through the cracks. Jason, he kept calling, didn't know I was sick. Still thought we were talking about marble countertops and skylights, not death and retribution. He asked how I was. I said busy, and he said, you sound softer. I hated that too. He looked at me like I wasn't broken. I hated him for it, because I almost believed it. By the time December came, I let him back in, just a little. Dinners, calls, a coffee shop in Florence where his hand brushed mine across the table. Just that. A touch. Barely there. But I pulled back like he burned me. Not because I didn't want it, but because it felt like kindness. And I hadn't felt kindness in so long it scared the hell out of me. Something in his voice made me shiver. Not from desire, from déjà vu. It was the kind of feeling I'd ignored before with the men who later gutted me. And there it was again. Soft, subtle, but undeniable. And that scared me more than the cancer. Because the truth no one tells you is, revenge doesn't end when they suffer. It ends when you feel like something has been returned. A name, a dignity, a heart. And God help the man who tried to take any of that from me again. Especially the one I almost trusted. Trust doesn't come to me easily. Not after 4 divorces, 2 scandals, and a cancer diagnosis that reads like a countdown. But Jason. Jason made it look easy. And that's what scared me the most. It started innocently. He brought me flowers I didn't ask for. Called me H in texts like we were already close enough to use initials. His voice was calm, low, the kind you only hear when you're lying on someone's chest, half asleep, half safe. I hated how my heart leaned toward him when he laughed at my sarcasm. I hated even more how I started waiting for those calls. 2 months after I let him in, just a little, he came to Florence, said he had business in Europe. I didn't ask what. I didn't want to look too eager. I still had a reputation to keep. The untouchable widow of love. But when I opened the door that day and saw him standing there in a linen shirt and that crooked smile, something cracked. Not broken, just cracked. And that's how it begins, doesn't it? He walked the vineyard with me, helped trim dead vines, asked about my childhood, my parents, my first heartbreak. No one had ever asked about the first. They always fixated on the last. He said, "You don't talk like a woman who's dying." And I said, "That's because I haven't decided to yet." He laughed. I didn't. We had wine on the terrace. I told him about my ex-husbands in vague metaphors. A banker, an actor, an artist, a lawyer. He didn't flinch. He didn't ask for more, just said, "No wonder you built fortresses." Then, as he poured more wine, he said, "But even fortresses have doors. You just have to know how to knock." And I should have known that was the first knock. Weeks passed. He stayed. Claimed he had time, that work could wait. He offered to help with my affairs, said it wasn't right that I was dealing with estate lawyers and doctors alone. I let him. Slowly. I handed over small things. Invoices, renovation blueprints, a list of passwords I thought were harmless. Nothing critical, at least not yet. One evening we were sitting by the fire when he casually asked, "Do your children know you haven't updated your will since 2017? I raised an eyebrow. "Why would you ask that?" He shrugged. "Just, you've built something extraordinary. It'd be a shame if someone else decided where it all went." That wasn't a question. It was a calculation dressed in silk. That night, I found him in the study, flipping through old ledgers I hadn't touched in years. "You keep everything," he said. "You never really forget, do you?" And I smiled. But something in my gut twisted. I brushed it off. I wanted to believe this was love, or at least the closest thing to it I'd ever feel again. He kissed me on the balcony. The wind was warm, the moon too soft. He leaned in like it was his last breath. I didn't stop him. When he touched my face, I almost forgot the names of the men who made me hate touch in the first place. But as I stood there, lips still tingling, I saw it, clear as day. He had Vincent's calm, Blake's charm, Michael's polish. I'd married this man before. He just had a new face this time. But déjà vu doesn't knock. It breaks in, and this felt familiar. Something in his voice made me shiver. Not from desire, from déjà vu. It was the kind of feeling I'd ignored before with the men who later gutted me. And there it was again. Soft, subtle, but undeniable. So I smiled sweeter, played softer, let him touch my hair and whisper lies. Because this time, I'd let him build his illusion brick by brick, so I'd know exactly how to bury him beneath it. Betrayal doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't kick down the door. It slips through the cracks you leave open for love. And this time, I had left a crack. 3 months after Jason moved into my world like it was built for him, I got a call. Unlisted number. I don't usually answer those. But that morning, something in me said, "Pick up." "Harley Van Devereaux?" the voice asked. Cold, flat, legal. "This is Agent Rosen with the Financial Crimes Division. We're looking into a recent wire transfer flagged through an account tied to one of your holding companies, DV Interiors Europe." I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just said, "I'll have my lawyer call you." Then I hung up, poured a drink, and stared out the window at the vineyard. Jason had been out all morning. "Meeting with tile vendors," he said. Of course. The man loved his materials. But what kind of architect needed access to your shell companies to choose flooring? That night I checked the cameras. The hidden ones. The ones even the security team didn't know about. There he was, in my office, past midnight, downloading spreadsheets onto a flash drive. Wearing gloves. Calm, efficient, like a man who'd done this before. He wasn't in love. He was casing a mark. And I was his fifth knife. The one he'd save for last. The one that bleeds the most. The one that cuts back. I didn't confront him. Not yet. That's not how women like me play. No, I made love to him that night. Slow. Like I hadn't seen the footage. Like I still believed. I traced my nails down his back and whispered, "Stay longer this time." He smiled into my neck and said, "I'm not going anywhere." And I believed him, just for that second. That sick, beautiful second. The next day, I went to Milan, told him it was medical. It wasn't. I met with my real estate attorney and quietly pulled the vineyard out of the trust. Liquidated 2 shell core. Froze the ones he'd touched. I bought a burner phone, set up alerts, then I flew home and made him dinner. Osso buco, his favorite. I asked him how the vendors were. He talked for 20 minutes about textures and colors. Not once did he look me in the eye. Later that night, I slipped the burner into his briefcase. It had a tracking app, a microphone, and a one-click data siphon. If he touched anything digital within 50 feet, I'd see it. What did I learn? That he was working with a woman. In Zurich. A wealth manager. Connected to a name I knew too well. Vincent. My 4th ex-husband. The one who tried to gut my empire like a fish. He wasn't dead. He wasn't even hiding. He was playing. And Jason was just the new hand wearing his glove. I should have fallen apart. I should have cried, but I didn't. I took a long bath. I poured myself a drink. And I remembered what my mother once told me, the last time my father left. There are men who will lie to your face and die with your secrets. But the worst ones? They lie while holding your hand. So I lay beside Jason that night, skin to skin, heart to heart, knife to throat, not literally, not yet, but soon. Some women cry when they're betrayed. Some women scream. I build. I don't mean metaphors, I mean plans. Paper trails, digital traps, legal mazes. I turned my pain into architecture, Every betrayal a new foundation, every lie a blueprint for collapse. After Jason, I didn't fall apart. I got organized. The next morning, I booked a second flight to Zurich, under a different name, with a wig, and a handbag lined with metal mesh to block RFID scans. I met with a private security firm, one of those discreet European outfits that only deals in shadows and offshore disappearances. I didn't want him dead. Not yet. I wanted to know how deep it went. And more importantly, how much of me he'd already stolen. What I found, accounts opened in my name, transfers routed through Vincent's former shell companies. Jason wasn't just working with Vincent. He was replacing him, but smarter, softer, more seductive. That night, back in Florence, I stood in my closet and stared at myself in the mirror. Black dress, pearl earrings, hair pinned. I looked like someone about to bury a husband. But this time, I was burying an illusion. I invited him to dinner, just the two of us. I made risotto, he brought wine. Halfway through the meal, he reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "I've never felt more grounded than when I'm with you. Grounded, like a plane before it crashes." I smiled, squeezed his hand, and asked, "Jason, if I died tomorrow, what would you remember most about me?" He blinked, just once, then said, "How you made me feel like the world wasn't fake." Good answer, but his eyes betrayed him. There was calculation behind the compliment. Timing. Calibration. He was still playing the part, too well. If you're still here quietly listening, thank you. Feel free to like and subscribe if you wish. After dinner, I kissed him goodnight and said I needed rest. In reality, I went straight to the West Wing, my old office, now sealed off. There, I activated Protocol Dahlia, a digital kill switch tied to every business asset Jason had touched. One swipe on my encrypted tablet and his access would disappear. His name erased. I slept like a queen that night, a queen on the eve of war. The next morning, he left for a supplier meeting. I watched him drive off in my vintage Jaguar. Of course. That car had never looked more like a hearse. 2 hours later, the trap closed. Emails bounced, accounts locked, contracts voided. His flight reservation to Zurich was canceled, his credit cards frozen mid-swipe, and in the center of it all, a single note left in his inbox. No subject line, no salutation, just 6 words. "You picked the wrong widow, darling." But I wasn't done. Not yet. I leaked everything. To Vincent's enemies, to 2 reporters I kept on retainer, to the Zurich firm Jason thought he'd bled me dry through. Within 48 hours, Jason was being investigated for international wire fraud. Vincent's name resurfaced on blacklists. And I had dinner by candlelight, in silence, watching headlines scroll across the TV like lullabies. There's a moment just before revenge is complete where you almost pity them. Almost. But then I remembered the necklace Jason gave me last month. The one he said reminded him of my strength. I cracked it open. There was a listening chip inside. That's when I stopped feeling anything at all. When revenge ends, silence begins. And silence, darling, is the loudest sound in the world, especially when you've silenced everyone else. The headlines were exactly as I planned. Architect Jason Reed under investigation for international wire fraud. Vincent Delacroix's criminal network resurfaces in Zurich. Names dragged. Empires undone. My empire? Untouched. But me? That's another story. I sat alone on the terrace, the same one where he kissed me the first time. The air still smelled like jasmine and smoke. My glass of Barolo had gone warm. I hadn't taken a sip, not because I didn't want to, but because nothing tasted like anything anymore. There's something no one tells you about winning. It doesn't bring closure, it brings quiet. And in that quiet, I started hearing things I thought I'd buried. My mother's voice. "Don't let them see you bleed." My father's voice. "A man only loves when he owns." And worst of all, my own, 12 years old, whispering to myself in the dark, "If I become perfect, maybe they'll stay." But no one ever stayed. And now that I had made sure of it, now that I had won, all I could feel was the echo of everything I'd never been given. I thought about Jason, not the con man, the version of him I wanted to believe in. The man who made me risotto, touched my hand gently, called me H, like we were something intimate. That man never existed. But God, I miss him like he did. I walked through the vineyard barefoot. The earth was cold, unforgiving, I used to joke that I'd be buried there one day, wrapped in silk and stubbornness. Now I wasn't so sure it was a joke. I hadn't told my children everything. Not about Jason, not about the cancer coming back. Yes, it's back. Stage 4. Final chapter. The irony? I don't fear dying. I fear dying untouched, not physically. I've been touched. God, have I been touched. But I mean truly, unconditionally, without motive, without a plan. I left them each a letter, my children, my empire, and one last letter, addressed to no one, or maybe to him. It read, I wanted to believe in us. That was my mistake, but I don't regret it, because for a moment I felt like someone could love me without profit, and if that feeling was a lie, it was still the most beautiful one I've ever known. I folded the note, slipped it inside a book he once pretended to read, then I poured myself a final drink. Not Barolo this time. Something stronger, cleaner. I stood in front of the mirror, barefaced, hair down, and whispered, You won't touch me again, but you never really did. And for the first time in my life, I cried without shame. I always knew I'd go out with a bang. I just didn't know it would sound like a cork popping. The bottle had been waiting for 20 years. Dom Perignon Rosé 2002. Kept in the private cellar under lock, key, and sentimentality. I used to tell myself I'd open it for something unforgettable. An award, a wedding, a grandchild. But tonight I opened it for myself. No music, no guests, just me, the vineyard, a single flute, and the sharp perfume of endings. I'm not afraid of death. Not anymore. Not after what I've survived. 4 husbands, 2 near deaths. 1 diagnosis that came back like a lover who never learned boundaries. No, death isn't the fear. Oblivion is. Being forgotten. Being misread. Being remembered wrong. So I wrote everything down. Every betrayal, every plan, every scar that looked like a victory until it bled again. I turned my story into a manuscript, titled it The Widow Manual. Left copies with 2 lawyers and a literary agent who thinks it's fiction. My children will read it one day. Not now, not while I'm still a ghost in their calendars, but someday, when they stop resenting my absence and start wondering who I really was. I lit the fireplace. Summer be damned. I wore a silk robe the color of dried blood and curled up in my favorite chair, leather, Italian, older than my youngest ex-husband. I took 1 sip of champagne, dry, bold, almost bitter, like me, and then I waited, not for death, for Jason. Yes, he knew where I was. I let him know. I sent the location in a single text. I forgive you. If you want to talk, come. Not because I wanted closure, but because the woman I used to be, Harley before the knives, would have wanted to understand. He arrived just before midnight, alone. Older, or maybe just broken in different places now. He didn't speak when I opened the door. Just stood there, staring, like I was a photograph he'd taken and lost. I let him in. We didn't argue. We didn't cry. We sat, across from each other. Between us, the fireplace, and 20 years of unfinished damage. I loved you, he said. No, I corrected. You wanted to become me. That's different. He didn't deny it, just looked down, then back up. Do you regret it? I smiled, not cold, not cruel, just tired. No, you taught me how much I could lose and still be standing. Silence. Then he asked, Are you dying? Yes, he nodded. Soon? I raised my glass. Soon enough. He didn't reach for me, and I didn't offer. We'd already touched the deepest parts of each other and carved them hollow. When he left, I didn't look back, just poured a second glass. For me. Only me. And then I did the most outrageous thing I've ever done in 55 years. I laughed. Loud, real, ugly, unapologetic. Because after all the poison, the pain, the perfect crimes and near-perfect lies, I was still here, still sipping, still Harley, and if death wanted me, it'd better come dressed for the occasion. They all thought love would break me. It didn't. It built me, harder, colder, sharper than they ever imagined. I didn't survive them to be remembered by their names. I survived them to erase mine from their mouths. And if death comes tonight, good, let her come. I'll pour her a drink. I'll toast her arrival. But she better wear heels, silk, and something expensive. Because, darling, if this is my last night on earth, I'll leave it exactly the way I lived. Untouched, unforgiven, unforgettable. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel.